Hey guys, so I know it's been a little while. I just wanted to come on here and let you know that I was actually planning on making a video about a week ago. I had already done the research and the notes. It's ready to go. I was planning to record it on either Sunday or Monday, but then all of the events in Israel started happening on Saturday. And so I felt like I needed to shift my focus a little bit into what's going on over there, what that means for where we are. Um, so that other video is going to come out at some point. I will record that and give that to you as well. It's a very good one. It's about, understanding truth and what motivates us and how to study on our own, because ultimately, while these videos are very informative and I'm hoping to help people see the things that are going on around the world, I also want you all to be able to um, search for truth yourselves, and understanding the difference between giving someone a fish and teaching them how to fish is kind of the theme of that video and the next several videos that I was hoping to make. But for now, I did want to address the things that are happening in and around Israel, what the prophetic implications are of those things, and how that is leading us towards the ultimate end times prophecies. So there's a lot of people who have had different, not I don't want to say interpretation, different understandings and different perspectives on certain prophecies regarding Israel and the things that are happening right now. There's a lot of talk about the Psalm 83 war, which most people for a very long time believed that the prophecies, that prophecy that might be, that was describing the 10 different nations in Psalm 83 was fulfilled in 1967 with the Six-Day War. There's people lately who have been saying that with all of the activity that has been building up and simmering around Israel, that particular scenario could still play out in a more complete way. I'm not going to speak to whether or not Psalm 83 has been fulfilled or will be fulfilled with the things that are going on right now. Another prophecy that a lot of people like to point out is the fact that Isaiah 17 says that the city of Damascus is no more. It is a ruinous heap, and Damascus still exists as of me recording this video. So a lot of people are saying that the fulfillment of Isaiah 17 is yet to come, and that could be fulfilled very soon. And then jumping even further, a lot of people are pointing to the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, or the war of Gog and Magog. And I wanted to talk a little bit about those three different prophetic conflicts that are described regarding Israel, the nations around Israel, and how they are similar but also different. And you can see the events that started with last Saturday's Hamas invasion of Israel was the tipping of a domino, and the chain of events have been started. They are going forward, and the dominoes are falling. So I'm going to be putting up some graphics for this video, so you'll see those kind of over my face, this beautiful face you guys like to see. But the pictures of the maps that are tied to the prophecies in each of those three sections that I was finding online were a little bit too detailed, to be honest. Like, people need to be able to see the simplicity of Israel, this tiny little nation, being surrounded by certain nations and groups of people that are wanting to attack them, as described in Psalm 83, and then a slightly different group of people that want to attack them from Isaiah 14 through about Isaiah 24. And Some people say that certain parts of those 11 chapters have already been fulfilled, but we can all agree that Isaiah 17 certainly hasn't been fulfilled because Damascus is still there. And then there's a much broader confederation of nations that attacks Israel during the Ezekiel 38 scenario. So I made my own graphics. I made my own maps for these, and I'm going to put the first one up right now while I go through my notes. You guys won't have to worry about looking at me. I'll just put the graphics up as I'm describing them and pointing to the different groups that are in there. So the first graphic that you'll see here is it's just a close-up of the Middle East, of Israel and the nations around it. And it's got little yellowish tinted globs around there. And that represents the Psalm 83 nations, beginning with the Hagrites, which are a certain area in Egypt. Those are Egyptians. Gebal is the northern Lebanese. Ammon are the Palestinian refugees and the northern Jordanians. Amalek are the Arabs south of Israel. Philistia is another name for the Palestinians. That would be the refugees that are in the Hamas area, as well as some of those that are in the Hezbollah area. The inhabitants of Tyre, which is specifically Hezbollah and the southern Lebanese. And Assyria, which is the Syrians and perhaps the northern Iraqis. And then lastly, you have the children of Lot, which is Moab and Ammon again, and those are directly east of Israel. There's a different map. I'm going to throw that up here as well. This is one of the ones that I did find online, and it kind of shows who those nations are on a more topographical instead of a black and white. But essentially, you see that the same things. These groups of people in Psalm 83 says that they conspire against Israel. They want to wipe Israel off the map, etc., etc. And this is the same rhetoric that has been espoused by those groups of people for as long as that conflict has been going on. Now, I, just like you guys, do watch videos about this stuff. I like to make sure that the things that I'm reading in my Bible are lining up with the things that other pastors and teachers are finding and seeing. If I were to recommend any person specifically for everything that's going on, it would be Amir Safadi. He is a Messianic Jew. He lives in Israel. He is right there with all the things that are going on. He has a much better insight from a Jewish perspective as far as their government, the activities around the area, what's going on. And he has a pretty good eschatological look at what these things are, and he's very adamant about the fact that this is not Ezekiel 38. It is potentially leading up to it. He's talked about the activity north with Hezbollah, with Syria. It would just be Syria in this case. He has really good information on that. So if you want to just pick one person to look at for a really good insight on everything there, that would be my recommendation. Now, the next graphic I want to put up is the nations that are mentioned in the chapters of Isaiah from about chapter 14 all the way to about chapter 24. The prophetic timeline here is not like a singular event, but the vision that Isaiah has is all encompassed within those chapters. And you have a lot of crossover in the nations that are mentioned in those chapters, along with the nations and the people that are mentioned in Psalm 83. So you'll see the next graphic is going to have the original, the yellow blobs, but it also has purple blobs. And the purple blobs are the groups that are mentioned from in those 10 or 11 chapters of Isaiah. First off, we have Babylon. Then we have Assyria again. Philistia again, Moab again, and also Damascus specifically. That is in chapter 17. And the one that gets added to this group is Cush. and that is in various areas in northeastern Africa. You're going to be looking from Libya through southern Egypt into Sudan, as well as some parts of Ethiopia. And some of the biblical translations will actually say Ethiopia instead of Cush. And in fact, the Ethiopian that I believe it was Peter witnessed to, who was trying to read Isaiah in the New Testament, he was actually from that same region there. He would actually be a Cushite. And again, that's just a translation issue. But Cush is the region that goes from basically Libya through Sudan into northern Ethiopia. Then you also have Egypt, which is again the Hagrites. And then Edom, which is an area directly south of Israel that might be coinciding with Amalek, which are the Arabs south of Israel, as well as Arabia. And these are all nations and people that are mentioned in Isaiah again. And that could also be in that same area that's mentioned as Amalek in Psalm 83. And then we have Tyre again. And then again, that's the Hezbollah area, the southern Lebanese and the southern Syrians. And then to top it all off, Isaiah 24 mentions the whole earth. So the prophecy that Isaiah is seeing through all of these chapters is not just the battles and the conflicts that are happening with these nations in Israel, but also pertaining towards things progressing towards the end times scenario. If you read through those chapters, you're going to kind of see the picture come into more focus as it moves forward. And you can kind of see that it's not just a singular event, but these are all the impacts of all of the events of the end times and what they have on these different nation areas. So now for the third picture that I want to show you is going to be those previous two blobs, the yellows and the purples, as well as a group of red blobs. And this is the Ezekiel 38 nations. Now this map, the one that I have first, is not big enough to include all of the nation and areas that are in Ezekiel 38 and 39. So I'm going to put up a second map in just a second. But I want you to look at the fact that these groups that are having conflict with Israel are getting further and further away as we move through these progressions of different prophetic points of view. And it's like those dominoes are falling. And as you go from the conflicts that are happening right now, moving forward, you're going to have Israel attacking its foes. And, they're saying at this point that this is the last straw. The thing that Hamas did last weekend has turned their minds from trying to somehow find a way to make peace with the countries around them to understanding that that's not an option. And so as that mindset progresses, you're going to see them rooting out more and more of their enemies, and that's going to get further and further away from the homeland. And so that's the progression that you're seeing here until eventually it gets to the point where you have the enemies of Israel are further away. So one thing I do want to say about the nations that are listed in the Ezekiel 38 scenario is that they are all descendants of the sons of Noah, with one exception, and that being Persia, which is Iran. Modern day Iran was called Persia up until about 100 years ago, 115 years ago or so. These are all further away from Israel than Syria and Lebanon, which is where Hezbollah primarily operates, as well as Jordan, Iraq, the Arabian nations, and the Gaza area. In fact, Ezekiel 38 does not mention Syria in any way, shape, or form as being involved in this scenario, which again confirms the fact that Isaiah 17 specifically, and in my mind, all of those nations in the Isaiah prophecy, that battle or conflict and the wiping out of Damascus will be complete before the Ezekiel 38 scenario begins. And because of the fact that Israel is going to be wiping out their enemies, they're going to be conquering the areas around them. And because of completely eliminating the nearest enemies, you're going to see them eventually reach a point where they can settle and live in peace without need for walls or gates. And that's important because Ezekiel 38 specifically says that when the nations that it lists decide to attack Israel, they are going to be attacking unwalled villages with no bars or gates or anything protecting them physically. And that can only be accomplished after Israel has obliterated the people around them that are trying to kill them. Once they have, in their minds, defeated that foe, they will be able to have their cities, their land be no longer with walls and bars all around them. That's a prerequisite for the events of Ezekiel 38, for the nations turning and deciding to attack Israel. So now, the actual nations involved in the Ezekiel 38 scenario are, the person, first off, is Gog. Gog is not a place, Gog is a person. And he's described as the chief prince, not the prince of Rosh, but the Rosh prince. The word Rosh, if you know from any of our other videos that you've seen or have watched of mine, R-O-S-H is the Hebrew word for head or chief, is in Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Kadesh. That's the head of the year or the head of the month. In this case, when a lot of your translations will say Gog, the prince of Rosh, it should be the Rosh prince. In other words, the chief prince, the head prince. However you want to phrase it, think of it as the commander-in-chief. We would say our president here in the United States is the commander-in-chief. He's the one who has the ultimate say over the armed forces. So Gog is the commander-in-chief of the nations of Meshech and Tubal, which are the northernmost regions near Turkey and Russia, as well as some of the other northwestern Asian regions. That's going to be the stands, as they like to call them. The Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, all of the stands are in that area that is described as Meshech and Tubal. Then you have Persia, which is Iran. Put, which is southwest of Israel into Egypt. Cush, again, is the same region of Cush that was mentioned before. That's Sudan, Ethiopia, Libya. Then Gomer, which is various parts of northwestern Turkey and kind of bleeding into Eastern Europe. And Beth Togarmah, which is a similar area to Gomer. And then the last three nations that are mentioned in Ezekiel 38 are Sheba, Dedan, and Tarshish. These three nations actually speak out against those who are attacking Israel, as they say, are you coming to rob and to collect a plunder, etc. They're vocally against it. They're not they're not militarily against it, but they're vocally against it. The first two, Sheba and Dedan, are the Saudi Arabia region, and Tarshish is believed to be more of a Western Europe area. And then, so I'm going to show another map that is it ties together all of those nations with Genesis 10, 1 through 7, or the beginning of First Chronicles. I think it's like 4 through 21 in First Chronicles is almost exactly the same wording. I'm just going to read that real quick for you here. These are the sons of Noah and their descendants. All right, so Genesis 10, 1 through 7. This is the account of Noah's son, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, who also had sons after the flood. The Japhethites are the sons of Japheth, which are Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. So 4 of those nations that we just listed before are descendants of Japheth. And then Gomer himself, Gomer had 3 sons, which were Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah, which is where you get Beth Togarmah. And then Javan, which was another one of the sons of Japheth, had Elisha, Tarshish, the Kittites, and the Rodanites. Now from these, the maritime peoples separated into their territories according to their languages by clans within their nations. That's the reason that it's believed that Tarshish went up northwest into the European area along the Mediterranean Sea. That whole area there, maritime, meaning the people that were traveling across the sea. And then the sons of Ham are Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush were Seba, Hivala, Sabta, Rama, and Sabteca. And the sons of Rama, were Sheba and Dedan. So you have all of those groups, except for Persia, mentioned as being tribes of the sons of Noah. So after the flood, when Noah's sons went out and spreaded amongst that area, in the Mediterranean area, the Fertile Crescent, if you will, they spread and their children became these tribes. And so those tribes are what Ezekiel identified them as based on where they settled. And so if we look at this other map here, you can see that same sort of spreading out of those tribes. And so that's what we use as our reference point for where this land is based on where the people were when Ezekiel made his prophecy. And that's why most people would say that it's going to involve Russia, it's going to involve Iran, it's going to involve Turkey, as well as the northeastern African nations. And then there's speculation as far as where Tarshish is at. How far west does Gomer go? How far west does Beth Togarmah go? That's all, in general, it's the region that's further away from Israel than the other nations are. But it's still the descendants that spread out through that area. So, when we get to the point where Israel has defeated her nearby foes, there will be a period, a lull, where Israel will feel that they are at peace. They will feel that they can have finally their land without having to have all of the defenses that they have presently. And at some point after that, Ezekiel says, God says that he will put hooks in the jaws of Gog, who is the commander-in-chief of that region that is north of, like near the northern parts of Turkey and into Russia. That's why most people believe that it's going to be mainly Russia that's driving this. When those nations all decide, at least in their mind, when they decide that it's time to go and attack Israel, it will be because of Israel having that relative peace. But there still being that spirit of hate toward Israel that is permeating through that entire region. And so Ezekiel talks about these nations attacking. I'm going to put up one more graphic here. This is a much broader picture of that region. As you can see, there's a little yellow blip there in the middle of the map with all the arrows pointing at it. And that little yellow blip is Israel as we see it today. And the red blobs around it there are far enough away that the only way for Israel to be resting at peace in that particular time is for them to have defeated the foes around them directly. And then, of course, Iran and Russia having the alliance that they have right now is going to lead into Iran, because they run out of cannon fodder to throw at Israel, deciding that it's time for them and their allies to attack Israel directly. So most likely at some point within the next couple of years, you'll see Israel attacking and further demolishing and defeating their direct foes. But we all know that those are mostly funded and supported by Iran and partially by Russia at this point. Once Israel defeats those around them and they begin to have their peace, Iran will eventually say it's time for us to go and do it ourselves. And at some point in there as well, you will probably have the reconfirming or the re-progressing of the tentative peace deal that was in works between Saudi Arabia and Israel. After Israel settles down, they will probably pick that mantle back up as quickly as they can. And that's part of the reason that Saudi Arabia, as well as the northwestern European area, are going to be vocally against the attacks that will begin with the Ezekiel 38 scenario. Again, there's no mention of the United States in any of that, in any biblical prophecy for that matter. We can already start to see the tide turning rhetoric-wise against Israel and some of the Western nations. And I think you're going to have more and more spineless reactions from people as Israel executes its justified war against these other parties that are attacking them. And I do personally believe that you're going to be looking at the United States, while they have a show of force in place right now, and they are saying the things they need to say right now, the administration that is currently in place in the United States has not historically been very pro-Israel in the Middle East region. And it is great that they are doing what they are doing right now, but I personally believe that they will back off of that at the first opportune time to do so. And they will quickly shift to the rhetoric of Israel, you need to stop. You need to find some way to make peace, etc., etc. But they've been trying to do that for a very long time. And I do believe that Israel has reached that point where that is not going to be an option for them. And even if nobody is standing beside them, they are still going to do what they set out to do when it comes to defeating the enemies that they perceive around them. And again, the United States and a lot of other more liberal, globalist aiming nations will begin to increase their negative rhetoric towards Israel as time progresses. And if you watch my other videos, then you know that I'm more leaning towards timing that works, timing that fits with all of the things that the Bible says about the events that are going to happen. And one of the things that Ezekiel says about the aftermath of the war, which, by the way, Israel doesn't stand a chance in the scenario that is described in Ezekiel 38. It is only because at that point, God steps in and miraculously, divinely keeps them from being completely obliterated at the point of the Ezekiel 38 war. There's more to get into on that, but the one thing I wanted to point out was that the description of the aftermath is that the Israelites will spend 7 months basically burying bodies, and then they'll have fuel for 7 years as a result of the divine intervention of God during the Ezekiel 38 scenario. And the 7 years part of it, as well as the 7 months part of it, is kind of important. Nobody knows exactly where the Ezekiel 38 war and events fall relative to the tribulation, relative to Daniel's 70th week. But if they're looking at 7 years for the tribulation, and you're looking at 7 years for burning the fuel of the weapons of those who attack them, and it's most likely, while it says that they're wooden weapons in Ezekiel, it's, and I don't want to spiritualize anything or to put something that isn't there, but if it's any sort of like an attempt to wipe Israel off the map with nuclear weapons, and God divinely prevents those nuclear weapons from being effective, but the material is still useful as a fuel, then that could be an interpretation of Israel using the weapons as fuel for 7 years. That's just one aspect of it. Now, I know that the tribulation is 7 years, and I know that They have the fuel to use that would last 7 years. It doesn't necessarily mean that they would use it for the entire 7 years. It just means that it is enough fuel for 7 years. So there's no requirement for those two things to overlap. And in fact, the remnant of Israel flees into the wilderness for the last 1260 days of the tribulation. So they wouldn't even have the full 7 years to use the fuel anyway. It's just the fact that they're going to be using it for fuel for some period of time. And you're also going to have a 7-month period of time where anytime they come across a body, they put a stake in the ground next to it, and they have crews that come around and bury the bodies. You have the animals and birds coming to have a feast on the carcasses. Like, it's very, post-apocalyptic sounding events because of the divine intervention that God will exhibit to end that scenario. But ultimately, I do believe that the events described in Ezekiel 38 and 39 are at the latest right at the beginning of the tribulation period. It might happen before the tribulation period. These dominoes that are falling right now, they could fall a lot faster than the next 2.5 years. They could fall over the next 6 months. And, again, like I said in the video about the elephant in the room, I hope that I'm wrong on my interpretation of the fact that the tribulation is 2,550 days, and the fact that the days need to be shortened because of an early Abib, so that what Jesus says about were those days not shortened, then no flesh would survive, like that makes sense only at a few points within the 19-year cycle that the Hillel 2 calendar uses, or the Metonic cycle. And you have to go back and watch some of my other videos about that. But the next time that fits with all of that stuff is in September of 2026, with the Feast of Trumpets. Again, the rapture lines up with the Feast of Trumpets more than any other time imaginable. The period of the tribulation going forward from there to 2033, and being shortened by a month, all of that lines up. That's the next time that lines up, as well as the two witnesses being revealed around the end of Sukkot and killed around Purim 3.5 years later. All of those things lining up together and fitting only happens 3 years out of every 19 years. And the next time that it will happen and fit is a little less than 3 years from now. This year was one that would have fit. The next one is 3 years from now. In fact, the Feast of Trumpets for 2026 is on September 11th. And that is the 25th anniversary of 9/11, of the attacks that happened here in the United States. I don't like to read into stuff like that more than you should, but it's an important date, and it is not unlike God to use things that we think of as either really important or really unimportant to put things in motion. So I won't speak to that too much, because there's nothing in the Bible that says, September 11th is an important day. It's just funny, interesting, I don't know, that September 11th of 2026 is the Feast of Trumpets. It is one of the times when it fits with that whole scenario, and it also happens to be the 25th anniversary of 9/11. All that to say, if everything is going to fit with that particular template, then you are looking at 2.5 to 3 years of conflict before you get to the point where Israel is at peace, and then you have the nations that are described in Ezekiel 38 being pulled towards Israel to attack. So it's just something to think about. I wanted to give you guys these maps because there's a lot of misunderstandings about what this prophecy means, when this one is going to be fulfilled, when that one was fulfilled or wasn't fulfilled. And knowing what nations are actually involved as we see them today is really important to be able to watch the news, watch the information that you get about the events happening in and around Israel. If you see more Hezbollah attacks, specifically from Syria, from Damascus or Beirut and Lebanon, like those nations, those areas are going to be involved. It's just a matter of when. And the regions and other areas still near Israel are also going to get involved. And eventually Israel is going to just say that's enough. We're going to, like we did with Hamas, we're going to tell your civilians to get out of the way because tomorrow at 9 a.m., we're going to be dropping 50 bombs on you guys. But Israel will always tell people to get out of Dodge before they come in and destroy the strategic targets. And that's a big difference in a way that they approach this situation compared to the way the terrorists approach the situation. And if you know anybody who is supporting the Palestinians in this particular endeavor, ask them, would you rather have a country attack you at 6:30 in the morning at the end of one of your holidays when everybody is sleeping and even the military is unprepared, and you just go in and indiscriminately kill everyone and everything with a few exceptions that you're going to take hostage? Or would you rather a country tell everyone in multiple languages that they should evacuate the area because that area is about to be attacked, and give them like a day's notice or more? Like, I don't understand how somebody can say that it's a disproportionate response when you're talking about the thing that happened last weekend. And some of the videos that I have seen are absolutely gut-wrenching. And to me, it's gut-wrenching. And I'm not there, and I'm not Jewish, and I don't have any family or friends that live there. And I cannot imagine being a part of a nation that had that done to them and not retaliating with the full force and might of our military. There's a lot of bad choices that get made after the fact, and those things need to be addressed when that's time. But right now, Israel is justified with what they're doing, and you will be hard-pressed to convince me otherwise. Moving forward, it is going to escalate. You are going to see Hezbollah. You are going to see Damascus eventually is going to be a ruinous heap that is going to be fulfilled in the very near future. You are going to see Israel finally feel like they have peace, and you are going to see these other nations from the further reaches begin to attack them. And that's when you know the stuff's about to hit the fan. And if we're still here all the way through all of that, then as Jesus said in Luke 21:28, when you begin to see all of these things happen, look up, because your redemption is drawing near. So I could probably go on and ramble more and more about this, but I just want you guys to know the next things you should be looking for is for Hezbollah to get more involved and for Israel to push Hezbollah completely out of the picture, and then, not Hezbollah, sorry, Hamas out of the picture, and then turn their attention more towards Damascus and Lebanon and Syria. That's the next thing that you're going to be seeing, because that's what the Bible says is going to happen. I'm not saying this is my prediction. This is the Bible's prediction. So keep your eyes open for that, and don't be afraid, because you know how the story ends. You know where this is going. Keep your eyes on Jesus, and let people around you know that this is what the Bible said was going to happen. And the only way to have peace through all of this is through the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ. And you share that with them, if you have a chance. Pray for Israel. Pray for everyone in that region, including the terrorists. Pray for every single person out there to find Jesus, the Messiah, because that is the only way that there will ever be peace. And it will happen eventually that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Just not today. Not yet. We've got some other stuff to go through. So keep your eyes open for that. I love you guys. I'll see you soon. Until then, Maranatha.